The Frauen-Bundesliga is expanding, so let's talk about it. The German Football Association has just announced earlier this week that the Frauen-Bundesliga will be expanding from 12 to 14 teams at the start of the 2025-26 season. It was a decision that all 12 clubs voted, and the majority of those clubs were in favor of this expansion taking place in the 2025-26 season. In a statement, the Federation explained that this decision is part of a development process and a result of extensive discussions that the Federation had with the league and all the clubs that were participating both in that first tier and that second tier. They see this expansion as a very vital step in expanding women's football in Germany, and they see that this is exactly what they need to make the league competitive, along with a few other things that we will jump into very, very soon. Now, a comparison of the 5 major leagues in Europe, it's only Spain or Liga F that has more than 12 teams. They currently have 15. The WSL in England, as well as the French league in France, have 12, and the Italian Serie A league has actually 10. Now, to make this expansion possible, next season will operate a little bit differently in how the relegation and promotion system works. Usually in the Frauen-Bundesliga, it's 2 teams that get relegated from that first tier to the second, and very similarly, 2 teams get promoted from the lower league up to the Frauen-Bundesliga. To be able to expand that and actually make it grow from 12 to 14 teams, only 1 team will be relegated instead of 2, and 3 teams will be promoted instead of 2. So you're starting the season with 12, you've got 1 coming down, which makes it to 11, and then you've got 3 coming up, which ultimately gives you the 14, which is the 14 that are going to kick off the 2025-26 season. So pretty nice and quick and easy math. However, that does not come without possible conflicts. In order for a team to play in that Frauen-Bundesliga, they will have to go through certain criterias and licensing, processes with the Frauen-Bundesliga and to be able to play. And that hasn't always been a very easy process, and that's not something that every single team in the second tier of the Frauen-Bundesliga will actually pass if you are to test them all on them. So there are certain measures and things that you are going to expect to see these clubs take. Additionally, Bayern, Frankfurt, and Freiburg have actually their second team playing in that second tier. So if you go on Google and look up the second tier of the Frauen-Bundesliga, you will see Bayern 2, you will see Frankfurt 2, Freiburg 2. Now, those teams cannot actually go and play in the Bundesliga because then they're actually 2 clubs taking 2 positions, and that just wouldn't make sense and it wouldn't be fair. So shall any of those 3 teams end up in those 3 positions that can go up, that could change who could possibly get promoted or even relegated. So you might come at a position next year where not a single team gets relegated, all those teams end up there. Now, the Federation hasn't actually mentioned what would happen in that scenario, or like what would a conflict of interest be shall that happen. So it's nothing to worry about right now. I'm sure the Federation is going to address it, or the league expectations, and when the league schedule rolls out and all that, they're probably going to address what would happen in that situation. So nothing to worry about, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on, because that would be pretty crazy to not see a single team get relegated from a league that has always consistently had 2 teams getting relegated. That would be something. However, a team being relegated from the Frauen-Bundesliga doesn't automatically mean that they will be playing in the championship. In fact, because when they go down, they're also applying for certain licenses and criteria that they'll have to pass, which is, again, not something that you see happen as smoothly as it may sound. Example to that is MSV Duisburg, who is a team that just got relegated from the Frauen-Bundesliga and actually pulled out their application to play in that second tier. Because they opted to not apply for a license to play in the second tier, they've been directly put into lower regional leagues. They took this decision because they didn't see themselves as being financially, in a position to sustain themselves or to be able to participate in a full season. Their men's team is also struggling. Their men's team is playing in their own, regional league, and they haven't been able to get backing from the men's side. And they've also had they've had a lot of troubles finding sponsors and Patreons and whatnot, but that could be a whole different story of something that we see happen too often in the women's game. In fact, the teams that get relegated and the financial struggles that they have to go through, it's often not very cut and simple of the fact that they just don't have good players. Usually it goes much deeper than that. But that's not the topic today. So is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Like, what's the general feel on this? Is this too soon? Is this too late? Like, what's the vibe here? So let's talk about the vibe here. And really, in a nutshell, the vibe is kind of a mixed feelings. Like, there are great things that can come out of this, but there's also very valuable criticism, and there are very valuable concerns and valid concerns that come with such a big decision. Ultimately, the league and the federation see that there's going to be more games, there's going to be more eyes, there's going to be more money that they could earn from revenue. They also see this as a step closer to having parity in the league. They see this as a step closer to having a more competitive league, and in a general sense, they also want to see those more games keep a rhythm of spectators coming in. And I think this idea of more games is where I say the vibes are very split. The lower half of the table is actually quite happy about this. The more games means that there will be less periods of rest for them. And you might be wondering, well, why is that an issue? And what the clubs have said is that there was times where they wouldn't play a game for 2.5 weeks. That could be because of a canceled game, if a rescheduled game, if there was cup games going on, if it was the Champions League, if it was the international window. They would be consistent periods across multiple teams that would go for almost 2-3 weeks without a single game. Not only did this disturb the rhythm of the players in training and keeping them fit and able to face Bayern on the back of a 2-week break, but they also struggled to keep the rhythm of spectators coming out every single weekend. And those spectators then were like, well, we don't have our favorite team to watch for 3 weeks, and that wasn't necessarily the best thing that this club that was already struggling to keep spectators to deal with. The bottom half of the table, the teams are quite happy that there will be more games and more visibility and possibly a better opportunity for them to get sponsors. And that's not necessarily what the top half of the table is telling you. Majority of their players go after the international break, they're busy there, they come back, there's either cup games that because they usually go further in the cup tournaments, there's Champions League, there's the league to already focus on, and there's already this conversation of too many games, a congested schedule, and not enough support, and how the players can rehab and recharge and everything around that chatter. And so understandably, yes, clubs are going to be concerned. Players are going to be worried about their workload. I think that's a very, very fair and valid piece of criticism. And I've spoken about this multiple times, but, women's football, as we see an increased number of games, we must see an increased level of support for how players can rest, protect their bodies, have the programs and have the support and the facilities and the environments and the staff to properly allow their bodies to keep up with this very hectic schedule. You're seeing games just shoot up so far high up here, but the support is still way behind, and then this little gap is where you're seeing all these huge injuries. On top of injuries, a lot of players are saying, I'm just mentally drained. I need a mental health break. And that's not a great thing to hear players. I mean, obviously they should be taking care of their mental health. And I think that comes first before even taking care of an injury. Like, that is very important. But we should be getting to a point where there's so many games and the support is still lacking behind, where we're seeing so many players fall down because of injury or other concerns. That is not great. So that's something that the league must be ready to address and must be ready to support, because if they want to add more games and more teams, well, you better be prepared to have their other responsibilities of supporting them, which connects really well to my other point of the fact that the Frauen Bundesliga is still not a fully professionalized league. What this means is that not every single player playing in the Frauen Bundesliga is on a professional contract. There's not even a minimum salary set in the Frauen Bundesliga, which is very, very troubling. You don't know what these players are kind of being paid, specifically of the lower table teams that, are definitely not making professional pay on some of these players. And so once again, if the league is saying that this expansion is a necessary step in making the league grow and improving women's football in Germany and making it more competitive, well, you better be ready to also make it professional and also take care of your players, because otherwise your plan is going to fail pretty horribly. Again, this is not me being negative. It's more of, I do think that this would work out super great, and I am excited to see what an expansion does. I think it's fun to see 14 teams do it in the Frauen Bundesliga. Like, there's a lot of excitement for that, but there is also worry of, is this just wanting to make a statement and wanting to have an expansion and then not actually taking up the responsibilities that come with an expansion. Another issue for me is the timing. I fear that maybe this could have waited a season or two, and that's particularly because of the funds and the contracts that the Frauen-Bundesliga currently have. So since last season, the Frauen-Bundesliga has been sponsored by Google Pixel. They agreed on a naming rights deal for the league worth $22 million, so that is about or around 20.7 million euros. That deal was for over 4 seasons. We just finished one, and then there's 3 more to go. It was said that 90% of all revenue from the deal would be shared equally between the teams, ensuring each team gets around $415,000, again around 388,000 euros. This means that the deal will be running when the 2 more teams join the league, meaning this 90% revenue number that you're splitting across 12 teams equally, you will have to be splitting up to 14 teams equally, which means if you do a little bit of math, each team will be getting less than they already are. And there's a lot of questions around that. Are the numbers going to match? Is this financially sustainable for the clubs? Is this an inconsiderate decision from the league to take this decision and not consider how those funds are going to be, broken down? Because the numbers need to make sense. These clubs need to stay afloat, especially if you're talking about an expansion and you want to see the results of it. The results of an expansion is not going to come after a season or 2. It's going to take some time, and that money needs to be there at the beginning to be able to support what those teams are trying to do to make that league a little bit more competitive. And this is something that nor Google Pixel, nor the league, or the federation have addressed on how they're going to split up those funds from the Google Pixel deal. On top of that, the new TV contract that they signed in 2022 is not going to be up and not going to be up for renegotiation until 2026, 2027, which is when it expires, which means the entirety of the first season with the expansion teams is going to be running under this already old deal. Now, this TV contract means that almost 5.2 million euros flow in from the broadcasters every season. The rights are shared between Magenta Sport, DAZN, ARD, and ZDF. They've got a few kind of rights split up and whatnot, and 5.2 million euros, that deal was a huge thing for the Frauen-Bundesliga. It was a huge increase from the deal before it, and it was fantastic to see them push for that high. And I think 5.2 million euros coming off what they were coming off is a great number. But once again, how is that number going to be split up and distributed across the teams when you have 2 more teams coming in? Again, the federation didn't really expand on how this 5.2 million euros is being split up between the 12 teams and the league, but 5.2 next season when there's 12 teams playing is still 5.2 when there's 14 teams playing, except you've got 2 more teams to fund and help stay up. And so once again, the numbers need to make sense, and the federation needs to be there to be able to support these plans. The league needs to be financially, backed well, and that's really where some of the concerns come. Specifically, the Frauen-Bundesliga, we have seen, like I mentioned earlier, a few pretty sad stories of the teams that are getting relegated because of financial troubles. How does that relate to the men's Bundesliga? What do those teams look like? And again, it's a topic for another day completely, but I hope these are things that are being considered, and in some ways I hope that this expansion triggers other great things to come, in terms of a higher TV contract, in terms of a Google Pixel possibly being joined by another sponsor where there's more money coming in. This could be the start of really great things, but that doesn't mean it doesn't come with pretty good criticism, I think. German women's football needs the Frauen-Bundesliga. The Frauen-Bundesliga has been here since the early 90s. It has been one of the longest standing women's leagues. That obviously a big step like an expansion is a big thing. There's going to be a lot of changes, but the league must go fully professional. They must look into what that is going to look like. And I'm hoping this does queue up really good things. I'm excited for the more games that they're talking about. There are going to be more eyes. There are going to be bigger chances for sponsors to come on. Those, bottom, or not even bottom, I would say lower half of the table are going to have more opportunities to bring in a higher income, more match day revenue. How is that going to look like? Is there going to be more incentive to host bigger or more games at the bigger stadiums? Those are all really great questions that I'm really excited to see. Exciting times in German women's football. In some ways, you'd hope they have a good Olympics, because then that would queue up some pretty good excitement in Germany for the league this season and the season following, which will have the expansion. So let me know your thoughts, your opinions, your ideas. Like, is this too soon? Is this not too soon? Is this the right decision? Is this not the right decision? I'd love to hear your opinions and thoughts on it. And speaking of the Olympics, there's going to be a ton of Olympics content coming here on the channel. Really, really fun stuff, really exciting stuff. I love what I'm going to be bringing here on the channel, so I'm inclined to think that you too will think. It's going to be some good fun stuff. So make sure you are joining me here for all the Olympics content. And as always, to stay updated and to continue enjoying the beautiful game, make sure you subscribe to me on YouTube and follow me on Twitter. And I will see you later.